Okay, this is chapter 6.6, inverse functions. Inverse, whenever you think inverse, the first thing you need to think of is switch x and y. We need to switch x and y, because that's what an inverse is. An inverse is a switched x and y, whether it is an equation, whether it is a table, whether it is a graph, no matter what it is. If you're talking with an inverse, you have switched x and y. That should be a guttural reaction. So the first thing we're going to do, if we're going to solve one of these, find the inverse of this equation, we are going to switch x and y. So we now, instead of a y, we're going to put an x. And instead of an x, we're going to put a y. And resolve. Now, if there were two x's, we put two y's. If there are four x's, we put four y's. One for every x, we put a y. So this becomes x plus 1 equals 2y divided by 2. X plus 1 divided by 2 equals y. And that is your inverse function. Now, if you want to write in function notation, an inverse function is f to the negative 1. All right? Yes, that is the power of negative 1, but that's not how we're using it. Whenever we use function notation, when we put a negative 1 up there, that means this is the inverse form of this function. And then the instructions tell us to find the inputs when the output is negative 6. So, for the inverse function, when x is negative 6, go back over here and plug it in. Negative 6 plus 1 is negative 5. Can't divide negative 5 by 2, so we've got negative 5 halves. Cool? Let's burn through a few more of these. Alright, number 2. Again, first thing you do, switch x and y. Switch x and y. So this becomes an x equals 1 minus y squared. We'll subtract the 1, so that's x minus 1 equals negative y squared. Divide by negative 1. So here's how I'm going to divide by negative 1. I'm actually going to do it like this. Not that the other way is improper. You can write negative x plus 1. That's fine. This just is a little more... I make fewer mistakes if I write it like this. But it's fine. And from here, we're going to square root both sides. Okay? So we get plus or minus the square root of 1 minus x equals y. Now remember, whenever you take an even root to get rid of the square, you have to put a plus or minus out there. If you took an odd root, like on number 4 down here, you will just get one answer. But if you got to get rid of a squared, or a fourth, or a sixth, or an eighth, then you will get a plus or minus out front. Okay. Last but not least, they want us to evaluate at negative 6. So the inverse function of f, when x is negative 6, just plug it in. Plus or minus the square root of 1 minus negative 6 is plus or minus the square root of 7. So, there we go. Plus or minus the square root of 7. Alright. If you're feeling so bold, try the next two, but I'm going to go right ahead for number 3. Come on. Move it. There we go. Alright, first thing you do, always switch x and y. Switch x and y. So that's x equals 3 minus the square root of y plus 2. And then just solve. If I move the 3 over, that becomes x minus 3 equals negative root y plus 2. Divide by that negative 1 to get rid of it. So that becomes, I'll write it as 3 minus x equals the square root of y plus 2. The way we get rid of a square root is by squaring. The way we get rid of a third root is by raising it to the third. And I don't feel like multiplying that out. I don't think we need to. So that's 3 minus x squared equals y plus 2. And then last but not least, to give myself a little bit more room, I'm going to go 3 minus x squared minus 2 equals y. And then that is your inverse function. Okay, sometimes on a test we're going to ask for the function, sometimes in the test we're going to ask you for the evaluation. We might ask for both, I really don't know. But I guarantee you we're going to ask you for the function. Alright, and then if we evaluate at the inverse function at x is negative 6, 3 minus negative 6 is 9, 9 squared is 81, minus 2 is 79. Just take that negative 6, plug it in there for x, and the 79 is what you get. Alright, last but not least, number 4. First things first, when finding an inverse is switch x and y. All right, so x minus 3 equals y minus 1 cubed. To raise it to the third root, because roots and exponents get rid of each other. So that is the third root of x minus 3 equals y minus 1. I'm not sure why I changed colors here. Let me go back and fix it. 3x minus 3 equals y minus 1. Last but not least, add the 1. So that is the third root of x minus 3 plus 1. The plus 1 is outside the root. Don't forget, don't get lazy with your roots. Don't like drag them over there, or don't cut them short like right there or anything like that. That's where it is. Right. Last but not least, they want us to evaluate. So they want to know what is the inverse of x, inverse of f when x is negative 6. So negative 6 minus 3 is negative 9. Here, let me just write it out. So that's the cube root of negative 6 minus 3 plus 1. That's negative 9 on the inside. Cube root of negative 9 is negative 3. Plus 1 is negative 2. So that's your evaluation. That's the actual equation. Cool?